What is up, my IT friends? Happy Tuesday. How you doing? Good to see everybody. It's April. It's springtime. I'm getting snow tonight. So who knows what's going on in the world. I wanted to talk a little bit today about something that hits pretty close to home, both with me working for Helpt and just my past life when I was an MSP. And it's a common stumbling block I see with using a lot of outsourced services. And so let's get to it. Are you abdicating to your outsourced help desk service, or are you delegating? Because there's a difference. I made a video a couple weeks ago about some of the problems I frequently see when people try to work with offshore teams. And that one wasn't necessarily about outsourcing. It was just about the idea of working with people who aren't in your office, probably never will be in your office, and likely have some differences in how they think and act from the people you're used to seeing. But some of the points I made in that apply here, and so I am going to repeat a few things that I said in that video. So a common problem I see when working with an outsourced vendor, specifically somebody doing call answering, help desk, knock, SOC, and anything where that vendor is really taking over a fundamental element of your MSP service delivery, regardless of where they're located, how they're run. I've noticed this common trend of abdicating the entirety of that business unit to the vendor. And while most of us that do this for a living, Helpt included, I think do a pretty decent job. There are really a lot of really great outsourced providers in this space. I've used a bunch of them. Y'all have heard me talk about them before. There's a bunch I haven't used, but I just know from doing this and being an MSP for a long time. But even given that most of the outsourced vendors are actually pretty good, there's a lot of common frustrations, the complaints we see that MSPs have when they outsource a service in this way. So in a lot of my videos, I have this poster behind me that I made over a decade ago when I was first a service manager at an MSP. It's my authority pyramid there. It's still labeled with my first MSP's logo, ThinkTech. And the idea of this was to help me and my team in the office do a better job with understanding our authority scope and when and how we can make decisions, so that I wasn't the one that was making all the decisions, and I was pushing most of the decisions down from being my call to the rest of the team. And I think for a internal team that works directly for you, this really is what you want to do, and this is a pretty healthy model. But when you're working with an outsourced vendor, a frequent thing I see happening is we almost sort of try to force this model on the vendor and force a lot of the decision making to be the vendor's decisions to make. And that's really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about abdicating. I don't know that that works as well with an outside team as maybe a lot of us would hope it would. So the most frequent example that I see of this, there are different flavors. The most frequent example I see of this that I saw both when I was an MSP and I see now that I do this as a vendor is some form of you engage with the outsourced vendor, a certain amount of time has gone by past the sort of the honeymoon phase, where the MSP starts to make comments, and they don't necessarily have to be angry, but they start to make comments around, I would think by this time you would have figured out X, Y, Z. Speaking to the vendor, where they're basically saying, I would assume by this time, vendor, with your team working with my clients and my team for this long, you would have figured out something. And what that really means, they don't mean, I would assume you understand how printers work, or I would bet at this point you know how to rebuild a profile. They're not talking about technical things. What that sentence actually means is, I would assume by this point you understand how to make a decision in the absence of instruction that aligns with the same decision I would have made. And really, realistically, that is kind of a failing methodology, although I understand where it comes from, because that's exactly what I would advise an MSP owner to do with their internal team. I would say, go out, give some authority and accountability to your internal team and allow them to make a decision, and then afterwards hold them accountable for the decision and use it to help coach and develop them. But the thing is, with an outsourced vendor, you can't really hold me accountable short of firing me and not paying me. And you can't really coach and develop me. And as much as I think it's important, and I said in my video about offshoring that you want to treat people who aren't in your office like they're part of your team, with an outsourced vendor, whether they're onshore or offshore, they're really not. They're not an actual part of your team. They may act like it, and hopefully you'll have that relationship, and you should seek an outsourced vendor where you feel comfortable having that relationship with them. And that'll differ. And there's a lot of us to choose from. But ultimately, we're not on your team. They're not our clients that we're servicing. We're 2 degrees of separation away from that. It's not our baby, and we're not even the weird uncle. And so if your expectation is that your outsourced provider is going to care about your baby the way you would care about it, or the way your family members would care about it, well, that's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen for the exact same reason that you as an MSP can't treat any one user or any one client like they're your only client. You're never going to care about any one of your clients as much as they're going to care about themselves, because you're not them. It's the same thing. So the whole reason why I bring this up is I think it really blocks a lot of MSPs from really being able to take outsourcing and truly turn it into a revenue force multiplier for their business. Because that is really how you should be looking at any vendor that does outsourcing. I understand right now there's certain services, and this happens with any new service. So right now, like a managed SOC is more something you might feel you have to have rather than being a revenue stream. And I think the industry is already slowly shifting in the direction of being comfortable of turning that into an actual value-added revenue stream. So if you're not entirely comfortable with monetizing the latest thing to outsource, that's okay. Let's focus on stuff that's not as new. It's not even that new, but you know what I mean. That stuff is not as new. Let's talk about like knock and help desk and call answering. All of those services are commonly provided by outsourced vendors, and they can all be something that can be a really useful tool at your MSP to expand your ability to do whatever you're good at. But you should be making money from doing it. And you probably won't if you're just abdicating control and responsibility of one of those business units to your vendor. So I will use an example at Helpt. So at Helpt, a product that we're launching soon is 24/7 US-based technical live answering. So it's Ruby or AnswerForce, but better because we have actual technical people doing the intake, assessing impact and urgency properly, giving you actual incident priority classification, and enough usable information so that your help desk doesn't hate you. I think that's a pretty cool service. That's why I put it together, because it's something that I enjoyed having as an MSP, and I want more of you to have. But the thing is, it should be something that you're able to use to generate revenue. And that either is by reselling it or by taking the money you would have spent doing it yourself and going and spending that money and attention on something else that will generate revenue for you. And in either one of those cases, when I say that, it's very easy to go, okay, well, I'm owner-led sales, so I'm going to focus now on selling and just trust that, for example, Helpt has got the call answering handled and I don't need to think about it anymore. And I'm just going to go off and do my thing. And that probably isn't the smartest strategy, because at the end of the day, I think Helpt's great, but we don't work directly for you. I don't know your clients. I'm never going to have all that siloed knowledge that happens inside your office. I'm never going to be able to represent your business quite as well as you can. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't trust me to handle those things, but it does mean that you should be actively delegating, not abdicating. And that's the big difference. Like with my pyramid here, you can't just say that the biggest piece of it is your decision helped do what you want to do. Because even if what we do is really good, it probably isn't always going to be what you need so that you can focus on actually growing your MSP and making more money. So you do want to rein it in a little bit. And the top of the pyramid are things that are your call, that are your decision as the MSP stakeholder in this. And what I'm suggesting with all of your outsourced providers that you're getting all of these services from is just be a little bit involved. You know, if they're having you take some sort of recurring meeting to go over what they're doing and their stats, take that meeting and give feedback. And while it's important to understand that they're just like you and they're not going to change their delivery model for every single MSP, no more than you, the MSP, would change your delivery model for every single client, you should still be giving them and expecting from them the same type of feedback that your clients would expect from you. You need to be a little bit actively engaged with piloting that relationship. No, I'm not saying you need to get in and micromanage and hypermanage. That's a whole other video I could make. And if you are that type, outsourcing probably isn't a good fit for you, because you're just going to get frustrated. But you do need to have slightly more than, here, this is your problem now. Because no, it's not. It's your problem. They're your clients. Be a little bit involved. So I know that was a bit of a ramble, but I just see it happening a lot. And it really doesn't need to. And I want everybody that engages with an outsourcing vendor to have the best possible experience they can have and have the best shot at actually going out and capturing more revenue as a result, which, remember, that should be why you are outsourcing. You are outsourcing something so that you can go make more money, either by reselling what you're outsourcing for more than you currently sell it for, or by taking the time and effort or dollars you'd be spending on doing it internally and you go spend it on something else. If you're not checking those boxes off, then you need to go back and decide if outsourcing is appropriate for your business right now. And if you're not sure how to do those things, almost every decent outsourcing provider I have ever worked with will have someone at Helpt I that will help you figure out how to pre-price our services and how to go about basically freeing up some element of your MSP to be a force multiplier so you can go focus that time and money on something else. If your provider's not offering that to you, go ask them for it. And if you ask them for it and they scratch their heads and say, I have no idea what you're talking about, well, then you're probably not talking to an outsourcing provider. You're probably talking to one of the big RMM vendors that have just bolted on a knock to their offering. That's a different thing. Have a great Tuesday. Don't abdicate. Delegate.